The steam from my coffee curled upward untouched as I stood in my kitchen on a gray Tuesday morning. The mug in my hand read, "Best Mom Ever," a gift from my daughter years ago. Today it felt almost mocking. My name is Evelyn Hart. I'm 64, 3 weeks a widow, and my children already believe my life is theirs to rearrange. The phone rang again loud in the quiet house. I answered on the third ring. "Mom, we need to talk about the house," my son Mark said. No greeting, no softness, just business. His voice carried that clipped tone I remembered from his teenage years when he wanted money. Except now, at 35, he wasn't asking, he was telling. "What about the house?" I asked, though I already braced myself. "You can't keep it. It's too much for you alone. Laura and I talked, and we think it's best you move in with one of us. We've already found a buyer." The word stung worse than the silence of my bed, without Richard beside me. I pressed the mug onto the counter, afraid my hand would drop it. A buyer. My husband's funeral flowers hadn't even wilted, and my children were circling already. "There is no mortgage," I said flatly. Richard had paid it off years ago, though they never asked. Mark gave a short laugh. "Mom, we know money's tight. Selling is the smart thing. You could even help us with a down payment. It's a win-win. Win-win. For them, maybe. For me, it sounded like eviction." I glanced out the window at Richard's rosebush. It needed pruning, but all I could see was how quickly roots could be torn up when profit beckoned. I didn't argue, not yet. I let his words echo until they hardened into something sharper than grief suspicion. If they'd already lined up a buyer, this wasn't concern, it was a takeover. And in that moment, I knew my children had underestimated me. The next night, my daughter finally called. Laura's voice came coated in sugar, the way she used to sound when asking for the car keys as a teenager. "Mom." "I've been thinking," she began brightly. "You'd be so much happier living with us. The basement is finished. You'd have your own entrance, your own bathroom. Chloe can't wait to have her grandma close again." Basement. The word lodged in my throat. I remembered that space damp every spring, crowded with boxes of holiday decorations and an exercise bike that had never been used. Last Thanksgiving, they'd sat me down there at a folding table, while everyone else ate upstairs. Now she wanted me to move in permanently. "And what about my house?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Mark has it handled. There's serious interest. If you sell soon, you'll have plenty left over, and we could even use some of it to renovate downstairs. Make it really cozy for you. Cozy, like a kennel." Richard studied my garden, the rooms where birthdays and holidays had lived, all reduced to a bargaining chip for their comfort. Laura's voice carried that confident lift as if she'd solved everything. "Besides, you'd never be alone. You could help me with meals, keep Chloe company when she's home. It would be perfect for everyone but me." I forced a polite sound and ended the call before my anger spilled out. My hands shook as I set the phone down. For weeks I thought grief made me tremble, but tonight it wasn't grief, it was recognition. My children weren't asking me to choose. They were arranging my future as if I were cargo, and if they were planning for me, I needed a plan of my own. That night, I drifted into Richard's study, a room I had avoided since the funeral. Dust clung to the blinds, but his presence lingered, the faint scent of aftershave, the worn leather of his chair, the neat rows of books he'd collected with care. I traced my fingers along the desk he'd polished every Sunday, wishing for his steady voice to guide me. The bottom drawer stuck for a moment before sliding open. Inside were envelopes, tax returns, and then a folder I didn't recognize. My pulse quickened as I lifted it out. Inside lay a collection of statements and notes in Richard's careful handwriting. He had been meticulous with money, but I had never realized just how prepared he was. Then I saw it a deed with a photograph clipped to the corner. Whitewashed walls, blue shutters, a terrace overlooking the sea, a villa in southern Spain. I sank into his chair, clutching the folder. My breath came shallow, uneven. Richard had once joked about retiring somewhere warm where roses bloomed year-round and the ocean was only steps away. I thought it was just idle dreaming. But he hadn't been dreaming. He had been building a future. My throat tightened as I stared at the photograph. He had planned a life for us he never lived long enough to see, and in his silence he had shielded me, because Mark and Laura knew nothing of this place. The roses in the garden outside suddenly seemed less like fading blooms and more like proof that roots could survive. Richard had left me more than memories. He had left me choices, and I realized those choices could change everything. The next morning, I called his attorney. The law office smelled of leather and old paper, a scent that carried weight. Marion Collins. Richard's attorney for nearly 20 years rose from behind her desk as I entered. Her handshake was firm, her eyes steady. "Evelyn," she said gently, "how are you managing?" I set Richard's folder on the polished wood between us. "My children think they can sell my house. Tell me the truth, can they?" Marion adjusted her glasses and opened a thick file already waiting. "No." Richard was careful. "The trust places every property, the house, the investments, even the villa in Spain, entirely in your name. The children have no legal claim beyond life insurance. You're the sole owner." The words landed like cool water after a fever. Sole owner. My children had been building castles in air. "There's more," Marion added, sliding an envelope across the desk. "A letter Richard asked me to give you 1 month after his passing." My fingers trembled as I tore it open. His handwriting spilled across the page, steady and familiar. "My dearest Evelyn, I know our children. They will try to convince you you're not strong enough. Don't believe them. You've carried this family for decades. Now it's time to live for yourself. The villa is yours, a promise of freedom. Do not let them take it from you." By the time I finished, tears blurred the ink. Richard had known. He had seen what I couldn't admit, that my children might trade love for convenience. I folded the letter carefully as though it could steady my spine. For the first time in weeks, I felt anchored. And just as the feeling settled, my phone buzzed. Laura's name glowed on the screen. Laura's voice sparkled with false cheer the moment I answered. "Mom, I've been thinking. If you moved into our basement, we could really make it nice for you. Mark already knows a contractor he could put in a kitchenette. It would feel like your own apartment." I sat in my car outside Marion's office, Richard's letter still warm in my bag. "That's thoughtful," I replied evenly. "And don't worry about the expense," she rushed on. "We could cover it with the money from the house sale. It's really an investment in your comfort. My comfort. As if I were an old cat being relocated to a smaller cage." "Laura?" I said, cutting through her brightness. "When was the last time you called just to ask how I was doing?" A pause. "Well, things have been busy with Chloe's tuition, I repeated, my tone sharp. "Tell me, how much each year?" "About $28,000. She admitted, plus room and board books, her sorority fees. "Yes, which is why I've been sending Chloe $500 every month since she started college." The silence on the line was heavy. "That's $12,000, Laura, straight from my pension. Money you never told Chloe came from me." Her voice faltered. "She knows you helped. Does she know the amount, that it isn't from some college fund you created? Nothing. She doesn't know, does she?" I closed my eyes steady now. "You let her believe I'm fragile while you took my money. That ends today." Before she could scramble for words, I ended the call. My hands didn't shake this time. They were steady with anger. It was time to act. The following morning, I called a moving company. My voice was calm, steady, as though I were arranging a simple delivery instead of dismantling decades of history. When the movers arrived, I didn't pack my own clothes or dishes. Instead, I walked into Mark's old room. His football trophies still lined the shelf. The baseball glove Richard bought for his 10th birthday sat in the closet. I placed each item into boxes, labeling them carefully with his name. Then I crossed the hall to Laura's room. Her piano books gathered dust on the dresser, her cheerleading uniforms still folded in a drawer. I packed those too, piece by piece, until the hallway filled with boxes bearing both of their names. These weren't burdens for me to carry anymore. If my children wanted me out of this house, they could take their memories with them. One of the movers, a kind-faced man, asked politely, "Ma'am, where should these go?" I handed him 2 slips of paper each with an address. "Deliver them as gifts," I said, from their mother. That evening, I opened my closet and pulled out the red dress Richard loved, the one that always made me feel younger than my years. I laid it across the chair by the window, because I knew Mark would come. He wouldn't be satisfied with phone calls and persuasion. He would bring documents, contracts, the illusion of authority. But when he walked through my door, he wouldn't find the grieving woman he expected. He would find me ready. Mark's car pulled into the driveway just as the movers loaded the last of the boxes. From the window, I watched him step out in his pressed suit, a manila folder clutched like a weapon. His face already wore that look of strained patience I had seen too many times. "Mom, what's going on?" he barked the moment I opened the door. His eyes darted to the truck, to the boxes labeled with his name. "Why are my things packed?" "Because memories matter," I answered evenly. "I thought you'd want them safe in your own home." He pushed inside, red climbing his cheeks. "This is ridiculous. Gregory's client is ready to buy. All we need is your signature." I closed the door behind him and leaned against it, my red dress catching the sunlight. "Tell me, Mark, how much did you promise to split with Laura after selling my house?" His jaw tightened. "Mom, you're not thinking straight. Grief clouds judgment." "No," I said, my voice like steel. "My judgment is clearer than it's ever been. Richard paid off this house years ago. His pension covers more than enough. Investments you know nothing about provide even more. I'm not drowning and I'm not weak. You assumed I was because it made it easier to treat me like an obstacle." The folder slipped in his grip. "You lied to us." "I never lied. You assumed and I let you. There's a difference." His face paled, words scrambling. For once he had no script. "This house is mine, Mark. You cannot sell what doesn't belong to you." The silence that followed was sharper than any argument, and I knew in that moment it was time to leave. The flight to Madrid was long, but the hours passed in a strange kind of calm. I stared out the window as the ocean spread beneath us like a sheet of silver. For the first time in months, no one was calling. No one was demanding. The silence felt like freedom. At customs, the officer glanced at my passport. "Purpose of visit?" he asked. Starting over, I replied, and for once the words felt true. Outside the terminal, a small woman held a sign with my name written neatly. Senora Alvarez Richard had mentioned her in his letter. She greeted me with a warm smile and a firm hug, as though I were already family. "The house is ready," she said in careful English. We drove south through rolling hills and groves of olive trees. Villages of whitewashed walls clung to the hillsides, each more picturesque than the last. When we finally turned onto a quiet street lined with bougainvillea, I caught my breath. The villa stood waiting. White walls glowed in the afternoon sun, blue shutters opened onto balconies, and a garden spilled with color. Lemon trees bent under their fruit, and beyond the terrace the Mediterranean shimmered endlessly. I stepped out of the car and felt the sea breeze lift my hair. For weeks my world had been filled with grief and betrayal, but here in this place, Richard had chosen. I felt his presence as if he had guided me to the door himself. "It is beautiful, yes," Senora Alvarez asked softly. I nodded, tears burning my eyes. He knew what I would need. That night, as I unpacked in the cool, tiled bedroom, I realized I hadn't just arrived in Spain. I had arrived at the beginning of my life. Days in Spain unfolded with a rhythm I hadn't known I was missing. Mornings began with the sound of waves brushing against the rocks, the air scented with lemons from the garden. I walked the narrow streets where neighbors greeted me with nods and warm smiles. No one asked what I could give them. They simply saw me. I bought a leather journal from a small shop and began to write. Not just about grief, though Richard's absence still sat heavy in my chest, but about the way the sea shifted colors with the light, the taste of bread still warm from the bakery, the quiet freedom of choosing how to spend each hour. Evenings I cooked simple meals, grilled fish olives, fresh tomatoes, and ate slowly on the terrace, letting the cicadas and sea breeze keep me company. Silence no longer felt like punishment. It felt like peace. My phone stayed mostly buried in my purse. Calls from Mark and Laura came daily, their numbers flashing like warnings. I let each one slip to voicemail. Their urgency was no longer mine to carry. But one evening, just as the sky deepened to gold, the phone buzzed again. I almost ignored it. Then I saw the name. Chloe. For a moment, I couldn't move the screen glowing in my hand. My granddaughter, who hadn't called since Christmas. The child I'd once taught to bake cookies, who used to curl beside me during thunderstorms. My heart thudded. Richard's words echoed from his letter, "Live for yourself now." But could I turn away from her? I pressed, except my voice trembling. "Hello?" And all I heard was crying. Grandma Chloe's voice cracked through sobs I just found out. "Mom told me yesterday about the money, about how you've been sending $500 every month. I can't believe I never knew." I sat on the terrace, the sea stretching dark and endless before me. "Sweetheart, you weren't supposed to know. Your mother thought it was better that way." "Better for her," Chloe said bitterly. She made it sound like she was carrying the whole weight. "I thought you were barely surviving, that you couldn't even keep your house. That's why I stopped calling. Mom said you were fragile, that I should give you space." Her words cut deeper than Mark's demands or Laura's basement plans. My granddaughter had been taught to pity me, to keep her distance. "Oh, Chloe," I whispered, blinking hard. "You have nothing to be ashamed of. You only trusted your mother. That's not a crime. It feels like one she choked. You paid for my textbooks, my sorority dues, even my spring break trip. And I never thanked you. I never asked how you were doing without Grandpa." Her sobs filled the space between us, raw and unfiltered. I let the silence hold because sometimes silence speaks louder than comfort. Finally, I said I helped because I love you, not because I needed thanks. But love shouldn't be invisible. You deserve to know. There was a pause, then her voice steadied. "Then let me make it right. Let me come see you. Please, Grandma, I don't want lies between us anymore." Spain was far. Yet the determination in her tone told me distance wouldn't stop her. "Spain is far, Chloe," I whispered. "Not far enough," she answered. 3 weeks later, I stood at the arrivals gate in Malaga, palms damp despite the cool air drifting through the terminal. Then I saw her Chloe hair pulled back in a messy bun, no makeup, no polished smile. She looked younger, more real than she ever had in the glossy photos her mother sent me. Grandma. She dropped her backpack and ran straight into my arms. The hug was fierce, desperate, nothing like the distracted squeezes I'd grown used to at family gatherings. I held her tightly, inhaling the scent of travel and youth, unwilling to let go. "You look different," I whispered, holding her at arm's length. "So do you," she said through tears. "You look like yourself again." On the drive south, she pressed her forehead to the car window, marveling at the olive groves and the hills dotted with white villages. Questions poured out of her about the food, the people, the sea. By the time we reached the villa, her excitement had become contagious. She stopped in the garden, staring at the bougainvillea tumbling over the wall, the lemon trees heavy with fruit. "He knew," she said softly. "Grandpa knew you'd need this place." "Yes," I answered, my throat tight. "He did." That evening, we ate bread olives and grilled fish on the terrace. Chloe leaned back in her chair, eyes fixed on the horizon. "Grandma, I don't just want to visit. I want to stay longer. I want to know you, the real you, not the fragile woman I was told about." Her words settled deep inside me like a promise. For the first time since Richard's death, I felt not just free, but seen. That night, after Chloe settled into the guest room, I stepped onto the terrace alone. The Mediterranean stretched wide in calm moonlight, painting the waves in silver. For months, silence had been suffocating. Now it wrapped around me like a blanket. I thought of Richard, his foresight, his letter, the way he had shielded me even from beyond the grave. He hadn't left me simply with assets. He had left me with permission to choose, and I had chosen this freedom, peace, and a life where I was no longer defined by what others demanded. Mark's face flashed in my mind his panic when he realized control had slipped away. Laura's faltering voice when I confronted her lies. For so long I had allowed their expectations to cage me. But here in this place, those chains no longer existed. And then I thought of Chloe. The determination in her eyes at the airport, the way she said she wanted to know me, the real me. She was proof that love could survive lies, that honesty could rebuild what manipulation tried to destroy. Watching her laugh earlier at dinner, I felt something I hadn't in a long time hoped for the future. I lifted my glass of wine toward the horizon. "You were right, Richard," I whispered. It was time to live for myself. Behind me, the villa glowed softly, already filling with new life. Tomorrow, Chloe and I would walk the village streets together, taste pastries at the cafe, maybe start writing the story of who we were becoming. For the first time since widowhood, I wasn't merely surviving. I was thriving. And I knew now that family wasn't about blood or obligation. It was about choosing love freely without strings attached.